Well, we all know who she is. She is a big name in entertainment. Babette Perry, who is head of broadcasting and hosting at Innovative Artist, has had this incredible career. And if we were to do a full bio on her, it would be like a 7-part documentary. It'd be like Lord of the Rings. So we're going to do this little condense it, a microwave version, tell some great stories from Babette and what she's been able to do over the course of her career. I'm Bryan Fenley, a national anchor at Fox Sports Radio and a host for UCLA. It is so fun to have you on here. And I know how busy you are, how many different directions you are pulled in, and how much you're plugged into entertainment and sports, what's digital news. You have so many different tentacles out there. And as you look at your career, what would you say has been the most validating thing for you that gives you that sense of purpose and why you love what you do so much?
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank you for your kind words. Just laughing because I don't see myself that way, and I'm very humbled by you. And also, I just wanted to thank you for your grace and how you do such positive,
Thank
inspirational
you.
programming in a time where everyone's about what's not right about the business as opposed to what's right. But to answer that question, honestly, I'm humbled by the talent that I represent and their heart and why they're in the business. I don't think I would work this hard and fight this hard if I didn't believe in what I was fighting for. I remember when I was younger, I was a little kid and I was selling garbage bags to the JCs on phone solicitation, which is why I don't hang up on these people because I was once one of them. And I recall how if I can sell garbage bags that I don't know that I believe in, what would it be like to sell something that you really believe in? And so I go back to my childhood of waitressing and all the things. I worked at Buttercup Pantry and Mr. Steak. And I think back at, looking at the salt and pepper shakers and knowing that at 1 o'clock in the morning, I had to have them even and the peppers had to be even. And I just thought, one day I'm going to do something. I love being a waitress. I think that being a waitress was great because I got to meet people and know about people, and I had people coming back. And it's very similar to what I do today. I don't think that phone solicitation or being a waitress is really any different in that you just really are selling something that you believe in, that you're passionate about. And like I said, my clients are the most inspirational people I know. They do things, they're selfless. It's not just about the business. Like Phil Kogan, for example, from The Amazing Race and his new show, Tough as Nails. This man wanted to create a show that would inspire middle America to believe in themselves, and especially now. He rode his bike from LA to New York to raise money for multiple sclerosis, almost killed himself. He didn't have to do that, but he used his name and likeness as a way to help other people. So most of the clients I represent are very inspirational. They tell stories and do things that change people's lives. So it's not just about being on TV.
Your clients are inspirational. And I think if I had one of them here, they would say that you are inspirational. I think you talked about why, just because of the humble beginnings you had and the work that you put in before you reached the status in what you're doing right now. I know you're very humble. I know you don't like to take a lot of credit for a lot of things, and you like to sprinkle the praise over you, which is certainly a testament to who you are and how good natured and how awesome of a person you are. But if you were to take a moment to reflect upon perhaps the trying times when you were just getting established, where do you look back then and say, I really am an inspirational figure for what I went through, what I endured, so that I got through that and then was able to get to where eventually I got to now?
I think that is an excellent question because none of us walk into our life in this perfect situation. I mean, my background is I went to UCLA, I took extension classes, I worked for free as an intern, like many of us had to do back in the day. And people like Sandy Groucho worked one shift, I worked the other. He ended up becoming the president of Fox, and it worked out really well for him. That the work ethic, the grit, the perseverance, and I think it's super important. When you started, like when I started my career, I was an assistant, and then my boss and I started a company, and then I worked till 11 o'clock every night, and there was no overtime. And there was no expectation. Like I always tell people, you have to enjoy the process as much as the outcome. And it's extremely important that you understand how important those words are, everyone, because if you go to work every day and go, I'm doing this to get to here, as opposed to I'm doing this because I'm excited, like you need to look at those, each job that you have as though that is your Super Bowl. You need to look at each job that you have and really enjoy exactly what that represents in terms of your life. Like I never went, oh, I'm going to work this hard because I'm going to be an agent someday. My job was to make my boss look like he was the most important person in the world. My job was to make sure that he was well respected. My job was to take care of him. It wasn't to take care of myself. And I think when people are selfless like that, they really, really are surprised by the way in which the outcome happened. I didn't say in my head, if I do this and that, this is going to happen. I hoped that something good would happen, but it wasn't as though I had to know that that was going to be there, because I knew that if I worked hard and I had discipline and what have you, that something good was happening. But I wasn't trying to look, you can't look at tomorrow or yesterday, you have to look forward. And I think that's something that's really important for kids today, is to understand that to get these jobs is a privilege. To work in this type of business is a privilege. And you have to not worry about your overtime or how many things are happening. You need to be very focused. And I think that's super important. From William Morris, we started our own company. And then from there, I was hired by ICM, and then I was hired by IMG, and now I'm at Innovative. And to answer that question about, what kind of issues you go through, this is a business that eats you up, spits you out, and chews you pretty badly. And so you have to have really, really tough skin. And I tell everyone I'm like the Hallmark card. Like I really am. I believe in integrity. I believe in the values that you have to have. And I think that's what separates me in a good way. I always joke about Hallmark because I love Hallmark, the movies and everything, and they're not typical of Hollywood. But it's so important that, having gone through a lot of tough times in this business, it hasn't been easy. I really have to thank the clients for supporting me. I have to thank my family, my children, my husband, friends. I mean, that's what you had. And I tell people this all the time. In this business, you have to have something else in your life, but just not the career. So by that, the balance is super important. Whether you're a mom, whether you're a good friend, you have to have something else in your life. And I look at my own children and my own husband. I mean, Ronnie, when he started out at UCLA, he was drafted, but he worked in Buffalo. He worked in Green Bay on those Tuesday days off. Well, on his off season, he worked at El Segundo Cable doing high school football games. He drove his car to Orange County at 4 o'clock in the morning and carried, cords. And he didn't want to be recognized as an ex-athlete who got a broadcasting job. He wanted to be recognized as someone who graduated from UCLA in the communications department, who was a good broadcaster and who happened to play in the NFL. And when I sent his tape to Dennis Swanson, the then president of ABC Sports, he hired him right off the bat at a beat up El Segundo Cable high school football game. And I was like in shock. And then I thought he was going to slowly get him in. And no, he put him right out there with the Wolves. And I really, really appreciate Ron's work ethic, because he never put his, NFL thing in front of anybody. It was like, you need to really recognize the hard work that I've done. And I happen to have played in the NFL. And I look at Lee and Shay very similar. Shay broke his back his sophomore year at Oaks Christian. A lot of people didn't know that. I happened to have been in that situation where I took him to his therapy, and I watched the blood, sweat, and tears. And I watched him challenge every single doctor who just couldn't tell him what was wrong with his back. And to the point I thought he was going to go to medical school as a sophomore at Oaks Christian, because he really studied the body and he understood, and he challenged every doctor until he got it right. And I really have to thank Dr. Watkins, and I have to thank his physical therapist, because they really, really got it immediately, understood him, was impressed with the fact that he was never going to take no for an answer. But what Shea did on the field at Oaks Christian when he wasn't playing was he was very inspirational to those players. Like, I think he did more for them off the field than well, I'm not going to say that because he's an excellent football player, but at the time he couldn't play. But I think he did more than some of the guys that were on the field playing. And I think watching him cheer on his brother, I mean, it took a lot, and not to be playing in those games when you worked so hard your entire career to get to that point. So when he did have his senior year, he was exceptional and he was doing wonderful, but he never felt sorry for himself. He never, ever would let me go, oh gosh, poor Shay. He's like, don't do that. That's an insult to me. And I have this and I've got this. So Lee had a very similar situation too, in that didn't have great grades, but he had the athletic talent. Like, he was very well recognized at Oaks Christian. And he went to Arizona. They had some issues with the team, and then he ended up going to APU, and they got rid of his football program this year because of the pandemic. They couldn't afford after 55 years. So the kids at this school had 2 weeks before Christmas to find a team to then get on so that they could get ready for the season. And injuries and things like that. Like, he had gotten injured his junior year. So when I look at the perseverance in my husband and my children and my clients and my family, like I always tell people, and this is a little dramatic, but I had to watch my brother die. And when you see that, nothing can kill you. This business can't kill you. Sports can't kill you. Nothing can. So going back to the point, I've had not great things happen to me. I've had things that really hurt people that love me, including my clients, including people in the business. But to persevere and know that adversity makes you stronger. I watched that with Lee and Shay. I'm like, shoot, if they could do that. Like, Lee this year got up at 4 o'clock in the morning every single day during the pandemic, drove to Azusa Pacific, worked out because he felt like they needed leadership, right? And then he came home and worked at Sherwin-Williams. Not a sexy place, but a good ass job, and worked really hard, and then studied till like 1 o'clock in the morning. So when I see through Shay and Lee and my husband, my brother, and my family, when I see people in this world that have gone through a lot of adversity and it didn't weaken them, it made them stronger. It's an inspiration. So to answer that question, I think in watching everyone else struggles around me, you can't feel sorry for yourself in this family. You just have to keep going. I'm like the Bobo doll. You knock me down, I'm going to come back stronger. Be careful.
Babette Perry, that was absolutely fantastic. And you watched your brother pass away. When I was 16, I watched my dad die in front of me, and the years and years of trauma. My dad had a really bad form of cancer for 5 years, and so I felt like I grew up a lot later than I did. Like, not. I mean, I'm in my early 30s right now, and I feel like I'm just starting to figure myself out, just because of the childhood and how hard it was. And you would understand too a lot of the adversity that comes through. And I wanted to ask you about, and you had a recent post on LinkedIn about this, the adversity and the perseverance displayed by your husband's dad, and what he was able to overcome, what he got through, what he dealt with, and why he's inspirational, because I think that really stands out.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. He is like my idol. Like, I really, honest to God, look up to him. He was so lovely. And in fact, like the night before the Super Bowl one year, he talked to me till 1 o'clock in the morning. And his wife, like, my mother-in-law, is like, he's got a game to coach Babette, but he wanted to tell me his history and how he got to this point. And it was an important time. I mean, Elijah Pitts played in the first 2 Super Bowls, and he coached 4 Super Bowls, and he never got to see the I don't know, he should have been a head coach in the NFL. There was no way that he should have been overlooked. So I know that that still bothers us, but we understand that others after him were able to get what he paved the way for. In fact, during the Hall of Fame speeches and all of those speeches that you hear, all of his players and all the coaches who were in the Hall of Fame, they always acknowledge him as one of the guys who paved the way for them. What I loved the most about him was his kindness. Everyone loved this man. He was optimistic. He was positive. He never yelled at anybody. He was just extremely gracious and incredibly humble, which is where I think a lot of Ron takes after his dad that way. But yeah, he came into this business where he was from Philander Smith, an all black school. Not a lot of kids can be found by the Green Bay Packers coming out of Philander Smith. He actually, which we just found out, was offered a scholarship by Michigan State. We did not know about that until recently. And the reason why he had to turn it down is because they wouldn't let him play in all the games because he was African American. So he had to make a decision of, where am I going to get the most, maybe not exposure, but where am I going to get the best playing time, which is a decision that a lot of young kids have to make today. But what happened was he then went to Green Bay, which was a phenomenon. I mean, it was just unbelievable and it was beautiful. Like, I mean, everything was good. But the truth of the matter is that they had black and white apartment buildings during that time. So we're not talking that far away. And so there was a lot that you had to deal with as being a young African American man. He may not have gotten the endorsement deals. He may not have, well, he may not have, he did not. But it wasn't important to him. Like, he was the kind of man that he wanted to inspire his athletes, his coaches, his management. He never ever felt sorry for himself, and he would be embarrassed if he heard someone like me saying, well, why didn't he get that head coaching job? Because he deserved it and he should have had it. And he was an assistant head coach when Marv Levy got sick for a while. They did have him as the interim head coach because he was the assistant head coach at Buffalo. But his grace and his gratitude and his kindness and his discipline and perseverance there's no wonder that Ronnie and the boys don't take after him that way. I look at Ronnie too, because I think being humble is super important. He was recruited by Bo and Paterno and Barry Switzer, and almost every major coach was in his living room. I would have had a heart attack to be in that place. But he never talked about it. I never even knew about it. And I should have known about that, but he just didn't ever talk about himself. And even at UCLA, he was joking the other day. He goes, I played in 2 Rose Bowls and a Fiesta Bowl, and I never made the cover of any kind of magazine. And here's Shay. And he goes, well, that's how God works. Like, he took it from me, gave it to him. And so I know for Lee and Shay, they didn't have the same kind of the same thing that happened to Ron, and they didn't get the glitz and the glory that he got. But they were gritty and they got to where they both needed to be the old fashioned way. And Ron is so proud of that, because there's a lot of pressure if you're a third generation on Lee and Shay, even though Ronnie does not put any of that on them, or nor do I. We looked at each other the other day, Ron and I, and we're like, can you believe what our kids have done? I mean, can you believe what they've accomplished? I mean, like, this is unbelievable. They both earned scholarships. Lee's getting his MBA, Shay's getting his master's. Like, what else can these kids do? Like, there's nothing else. And, Shay has been awarded, as you know, because you've been so lovely to talk about it, but awards that, like, we didn't even know that he did this. So I said to Shay, I'm like, what do you do every day? I thought you were just going to school. And he goes, oh, downtown, working my thing. But he goes, when you volunteer, when you do those things, you don't tell people, because you do those things because of your love for people. And both Shay and Lee, I remember Lee was at Arizona one day and he said he's chopping onions. I'm like, you're in a dorm. What are you chopping onions for? And he goes, oh no, we're feeding the homeless. And I'm like, when did you start doing this? He goes, I've been doing this since the day I came here. And he goes, since they introduced me to a program. So what I do love is that Ron has always taken the kids downtown. We always go to the shelter and we always bring clothes. And then Thanksgiving, we serve. We love doing that. I mean, not because of pandemic, we haven't been able to go in the last couple of years, but Ron has always taken the kids downtown, and he has shown them, how lucky you are. And so they did take that from us. They never talked to Ron or myself about it. They just did this on their own, which I really appreciate that. I was just like, what is this award and what does it mean? And, and I'm like, what do you do? And he goes, yeah, Mom, you just don't talk about it, you just do it. And I really, that was probably really one of the most lovely things that happened, because then you're like, they did learn, they did understand, but we didn't have to tell them to do that. They did that on their own, and they're going to hand that off to their children too.
Babette Perry is with us. I think they learned it from you by your actions growing up, and then they took that on as their own, and they realized just what sort of presence you had and Ronnie had in their lives, and they want to carry that in a way and do so much good and give back, like you were saying. And they've been giving back, so have you. And where do you think that you've given back the most for professionally? Helping someone specifically, going outside of the realm of responsibilities, doing something for someone. And again, there's probably so many times, so it's probably hard to specialize on one person or another, but where you talk about this kindness and being uplifting in a business that you said can tear people apart. But how have you found a way to go around that and prop people up in the process of doing that?
I think that's the joy of my job. And I think I really, I get a lot of tapes every day and I get submissions all the time. And it's so hard because the part of my problem is I want to help everyone. Like if someone loses their job, the first thing I do is pick up the phone and call them and get their resumes out to everyone and anyone I possibly can to get them employment. There's a big responsibility in what I do. Like someone spends weeks, sometimes months, maybe a year to put together a tape. And if I don't watch that tape and I just dismiss it, then I'm going to hurt someone's life, because I don't like that responsibility because I feel badly that I can't work with the world. But I do help a lot of people, especially people who lose their jobs and a lot of people if they want advice. I do a lot more of that than I have time to do. But I remember several years ago, a friend of mine asked me if I would meet with her former boss, who apparently was going through some alcoholic substance issues and it couldn't get arrested. This famous guy that couldn't get arrested. And I took the meeting because I felt like nobody else would take the meeting. And I felt it was the right thing to do. And in taking that meeting, my agenda was just to let him know that the world isn't bad and just you should be admired for the fact that you are getting through your substance addiction and I'll do whatever I can to help you. I'm not sure that somebody will hire you because it's been public, but I will do what I can. Well, about a year later, I got a call from some major executive in the business, and he handed me a talent and said, I am going to be doing a new talk show at my network, and I want you to do the deal. And I'm like, that seems very odd that a network president would present to me a talent. And then I never understood why. And I ended up representing this young guy, and he got his big talk show, and the deal was just handed to me and I never understood. And then later in life, or I don't know how far afterwards, the head of the network said, a couple of years ago you met with my roommate from college, and I just couldn't believe that you were the only agent that would take a meeting.
Oh.
So it's like pay it forward. So that's an example, and it's happened to me a couple other times in my career where somebody wants to reward me for good behavior as opposed to not. And it doesn't happen that often. And I don't have any agenda when I do it. I do it from my heart. But this one other kid, this one executive in the business told me that he can't get his phone calls returned. I'm like, oh my God, you're the most important executive in our business. And that nobody would take meetings with his son. I go, this is too embarrassing for you. It's too hard on you, not embarrassing, but hard on you to call people.
Sure.
Let me take care of this. And I did. I didn't know if I was going to get one or two or five or six responses, but I didn't want him to have that pressure on him because I know how hard it is being, representing your own kid or a family member. And so you wanted to help him out. And so I felt really good because he got like 10 job interviews. So I don't know if he's gotten, this is just recent, but it's just that should not be that someone does not return someone's phone call. And I have a pet peeve with that. I return every email and every phone call. And it's something really bad had to happen if I didn't get back to someone. And I think that's really where people dismiss people. What I don't like about the industry is that when there's a big executive in this business, and when he was let go, I called him and said, okay, what are we going to do about your career? How are we going to fix this situation? And he said that, do you know that you're the only agent that called me? Like I'm no longer
Oh.
important to them. And you're one of the few people that even reached out. but he never forgot that. And he's one of my very closest friends. And I didn't do it for an agenda. I did it because you're brilliant and you should be respected. So I think that's really important, is especially when someone, especially during the pandemic, when people are losing their jobs, this is where people, I feel there's a responsibility from me that I am employed right now and I can help people. And so I know that sounds crazy, but I think it's awful that people don't return people's phone calls because they don't think they're of value anymore. So I don't really respect that, to be honest with you, at all.
Babette Perry is with us. I'm Bryan Fenley. Absolutely. I totally see that, and why you're that bright light in this business. I wish there were more of you. And one of the things that everybody deals with is rejection. Everybody deals with it from one form or another. And like you talked about earlier in this interview, the thick skin is important. Easier said than done, obviously, because people put so much effort and time into their work and they take it personal. And the thing they have to do is to find ways to realize that it's not always that individual person, it's what they're looking for, which might be different than what perhaps you have. But for you, dealing in a business that has so much rejection, where was a moment maybe early on in your career where you didn't get an answer that you liked about your own career and your own progress, but you didn't let it stop you? And you found a way, regardless, to get to where you wanted to, even when somebody put out a temporary stop sign.
I think that's a good question. All your questions are really
Thank you.
appreciate how much effort you put into the thought process here.
Me too.
I always said to everyone in our business, it's not about what's right, it's about what's wrong. You didn't get the job because of X. This didn't happen because of X. You're to this, you're to that. Imagine a business where they actually turn that around and you tell them, this is why I think this could work. If you did this, this could happen. Or if you did this differently, this could happen. And so I think what we have to do is change the paradigm. I think we need for people to look at the talent and look at what's out there and figure out a way that something could work or why this could be right. Because immediately, too old, too young, not the right personality, not a great voice, whatever it is, why don't we figure out a way to fix that? And it's funny. I remember when I was interviewing, when I was transitioning, I've been involved in two, as I said before, major mergers that, I'm at the top of my game. My clients are the best, I think, in the business, and little prejudice um, that you can lose your job in this business. It's kind of like the NFL. You're only as good as your last game. A new coach comes in and quarterback changes. I remember early on, and we'll get into why the answer to your question, but I want to get there
Yeah.
this way. My husband used to tell me, like, you're replaceable. And I thought, oh my gosh, like, you want to hear that from your husband? Like, I'm replaceable. Like, wait, I'm really good at what I do. My clients are doing really well. And you think you have a fairly good reputation. And he said, Babette, it's just like the NFL. It has nothing to do with how talented you are. It really, and I was thinking he was very cynical, but the truth of the matter is he was really preparing me for what happened down. I was living nirvana for many years after my William Morris life. And then was like in my tracks, like betrayed and in this industry, which happens frequently. But I didn't think it would happen to me. I was a little arrogant about that, or maybe it wasn't arrogant. I think it was really innocent. And I think that I thought so highly of people that I never thought that somebody could do that to me. And when it happened, and it didn't happen once, it happened a couple times, then the thick skin is interesting. Like, I think it's where you are mentally in your life right now. Had I not gone through my brother's death, had I not gone through my father's death, had I not gone through some true emergency situations, was I able, it's almost in some way God was making those things happen so that when the big career blow happened, that you were able to handle it differently. Because like I said, when you see someone go through dying, how could anything kill you after that? Because that's life or death. And the one thing we have to realize about our industry is it isn't life or death. It just isn't. And, it's not the message. It's how you deliver the message in life that's so important. I have been let go a couple different ways. One is one company, I was driving on the freeway and and I was leaving like a really famous person's house. And I thought he was calling me to congratulate me on this deal that I did. And he said, well, you need to pull over. He said, I just want you to know that we've gone through a merger and I really respect you. And if I start a company, you will be my president, but I have no choice in the matter. And this is what this company is doing. They're downsizing certain departments. And I was like, oh my gosh, but it was the message and the way in which he communicated to me that made me feel so confident about myself that, he was being very graceful and gracious as opposed to other situations where they're abrupt and they throw you out and they chew you up. And, I've had the two different approaches happen. And so, it is hard, it's hard because I look for the good in everyone. And I really want people to be good in spirit. And I always try to figure out ways to like rationalize why things happen. But yeah, so those things happen and I had to have tough skin. And a lot of it happened because slowly but surely bad things did happen. But in some ways, the bad things that happen, adversity does make you stronger because those experiences made you a little bit tougher and a little bit more not so naive about how the industry works. Um, and then one other really important point that I think is important, it doesn't have so much to do with like getting let go or this, that, and the other, but it has to do with the fact that I thought my most successful years in my business were when I was the most naive, when I didn't know the rules, when I got to create those rules. And a lot of people, you can't do this and you can't do that. And I was, when I was a little feisty thing. I was representing Flower and Tom Bergeron. I'm like, I had this meeting for you with Les Moonves. And Tom Bergeron said, are you sure they don't think it's Tom Berenger? I'm like, no, no, I said Tom Bergeron. And I'm thinking, do you think he thinks it's Tom Berenger? I wasn't sure. And then the same thing with Matt Lauer. I mean, I remember being a young up and coming agent and telling these networks, you don't have to hire another client of mine, but you need to take this meeting. And one of them was Greg Kinnear, one of them was Matt Lauer, and one of them was Julie Moran, my little guinea pig clients. And they're like, whoa, I can't believe you did this. I go, and I told them that you don't have to hire another client of mine, but I didn't have a lot of clients. So I had nothing to lose. But I had a lot of feistiness in me. And I think not knowing the rules or not knowing you can't pick up the phone and call the president of a network really defined exactly where I was in my life. I just didn't know. And sometimes when you don't know, that's the most powerful place you can be.
How do you define where you are right now based upon the love you have for your brother and how you're using him and his spirit to carry you to what you're trying to do as a source of motivation, as a source of making him proud and doing everything in his honor like you've been doing?
That's so funny you said that because when he died, that's what I said. I'm going to now take, instead of being bitter and angry, the thing I said to myself, and I say this to everyone who deals with death because death is really hard. And my father and my brother and other family members, I say that, would you rather go through your life and never experience this relationship, or would you go through the pain that you feel when this person actually leaves the universe? And so I figured that I'd rather go through the pain but have those memories, because my brother in particular was the one who took Lee and Shay. Ronnie was on the road all the time and helped me with Lee and Shay, went to their baseball games and their little soccer games and what have you, and really taught them about the Lakers and UCLA and the Dodgers and all of that. And I really wanted, he's such a great human being. He had positive outlook. There was not a negative bone in his body. He looked at the life with this incredible lens. So I vowed that to the best of my ability, if I can live my life like him, and I'm not perfect at it, believe me, that would be the way in which I honored him. So that was funny that you said that, because that's exactly how I wanted to go, is to honor his legacy of how loved and respected he was by being, when I was naughty, thinking, what would Kevin do? And I know he wouldn't do that. So I really tried to live my life and make sure that Lee and Shay understood how incredible and wonderful he was when they were little, and so that they understood him.
Babette Perry, you are a role model, not just to your own kids, not only to the UCLA student body, but to everybody in entertainment by the way in which you conduct business, by the way in which you have forged relationships. You're doing it the right way. And I first of all, as you know, I'm a huge fan of both of your sons, but I've gotten to know Shay more from UCLA. And one of the things that I noticed from him early on was he has a lot. Now that I've gotten a chance to talk to you and meet with you,
Mhm.
he really has that positive, uplifting demeanor about him. Like no matter what is on his plate, it's like, and I can see this from you, I can see this from him. It's, I'm going to find a way. No matter what is thrown my way, whatever obstacles, it's going to be okay. I'm going to find a way to overcome it. And I see that from him, and I can see in part where he got that from,
Mm.
and he got that from you. And so first of all, it's an honor to finally get to meet you and to spotlight you. And thank you for your time. I really had this amazing opportunity to want to be able to showcase you. And you're a UCLA grad as well. So, go Bruins. And this football team has been exciting. And my mom went to UCLA. I myself did not, although I worked there, but my mom went there. She met my dad on campus there. So there's a lot of cool connections. And Babette, you are very inspirational. And I wanted to make sure that more people realize what kind of person you are. And I think the world needs to know more about Babette Perry. So hopefully this is a place, a platform where they'll be able to see more of that. Babette, I'm
I,
Bryan Fenley. I really appreciate you so much.
yeah, I just wanted to end in a happy note about my UCLA Bruins for a moment. Marty Gregory and Jeffrey Cole were mentors of mine, and I had the honor of them still being mentors. And so when you go back and you talk about like college and why it's important, like when you ask the question of like, what motivates you, like when you have your two professors who get behind you and constantly are giving you love and positive feedback all the time, that really matters. And in closing, just going back to Shay for a moment and then we'll close. But, when he was a little boy, he used to write Valentine's cards to every single kid as to why they were important.
Oh,
And then he would make sure that every kid was invited to his birthday party because he didn't want anyone to feel like they weren't included. And so, what I loved about that was him being so sensitive at a really young age to make sure that those kids who didn't get invited to birthday parties were the ones that he wanted to be invited to birthday parties. And Lee was very similar in that too. Like if there was kids getting bullied or something, Lee would be the one to protect those kids. And Shay did the same thing. And so just in closing, I want to thank you for the opportunity to get to spend some time with you. And you're so lovely. But like, if you talk to my family, they're like, "Oh, is that my mom?" They're
thank
they're like, how they look at moms differently. But you are so, so lovely and so kind, and
you.
keep spreading the positive word in the shows that you do, because I know that you've been encouraging a lot of people who really need that now. And so thank you so much. It's been an honor and a pleasure to be a part of your show. Thank you.
Thank you.